We've got a really great audience I can see already, and a really great panel talking about an exciting subject here, AI interviewing in hiring. So really excited to have Erika Oliver, Prem Kumar, Matt Charney, all here to dig into this topic. Um, Matt, Erika, Prem, do you all want to introduce yourselves real quick and give us a little background?
Sure. So I'll start. So I'll be
Okay.
moderating this conversation. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Charney. I've been in this industry for longer than I care to admit, but in all sorts of roles, most recently as the editor-in-chief and chief marketing officer for recruiter.com. And I'm very, very interested in this topic and can't wait to hear what our panelists have to say.
Awesome. You want to go next, Erica?
Sure. So my name is Erika Oliver, and I am an executive analyst at Aptitude Research, as well as managing director for Newton House Coaching and Consulting. I have been in this space also for longer than I care to admit, both from a practitioner's perspective as well as from a product perspective. I was formerly chief product officer for a labor market analytics firm, and formerly in executive search internally for TA at both Meta and Indeed.
Awesome. Really excited for this conversation. My name is Prem Kumar, CEO and co-founder at Humanly. Humanly, we work with high volume hiring teams to make more efficient screening, scheduling, interviewing. Prior to this, I spent some time at Tiny Pulse and then Microsoft, where I was in a product role that was focused on HR products. So when we acquired LinkedIn, one of my roles was bringing that enormous set of data into the ecosystem.
Awesome.
Sweet. Well, thank you all. As far as the format today, please feel free to throw in questions at any time. We'll try to be on those. I'll be watching the chat for those. We'll be asking a few poll questions, so please participate. Really want to get your feedback and answers as well. And then some of the topics we're going to be covering today. But yeah, Matt, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, go ahead. You're going to share the deck, correct?
Yeah. Can you see my screen right now?
I can see you.
Oh no. Preem, Erica, can you
Uh,
see?
I'm actually seeing it.
Oh, are you?
I
Okay.
am too. Yeah.
Okay, that's my problem. Yes, I see it. Thank
Okay.
you. So, by the way, this webinar is actually not about how to control the tabs and open windows on your computer because it was quite varied. So, obviously, we did the introduction webinar flow. We'll be doing the poll questions along with the live Q&A so we can kind of just get a bit of a temperature down for where everyone in this call is at with AI interviewing. And then some of the topics, the hot topics we'll be talking about that are associated with this, where I'd really encourage some feedback are regarding efficiency and ROI, fairness and bias, everyone's favorite candidate experience. We'll be discussing any risks or red flags associated with AI interviewing, and then taking it on to close and some next steps there. So let's get it kicked off. Okay, so poll question number one is how far along in your organization are you using AI for interviewing? One is going to be already using it. Two is going to be piloting, testing it. Three is going to be planning to use it soon. And four, no plans yet. So pop up on the screen. And give this.
Awesome. Matt, can you see the responses or I can relay these too. I'm not sure if they're public or not.
No, I cannot actually.
All right. Well, I get the exciting job of uncovering these poll results. Um, so we got a lot of responses really fast here, which is awesome. So 37% say already using it,
Wow.
11% say piloting, testing it. 26% say planning to use it soon, and 26% say no plans yet. So pretty even distribution across the board there, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we have a really accelerated crowd. So just a data point. Only 24% of companies right now actually across the board use AI in interviewing. So obviously this seems like a little bit more advanced there. So awesome. With that said, I want to dive into the first question and uh, you know, I just want to ask our panelists when we talk about AI interviewing, because as we know in AI, standard definition of words is a really important thing. What does AI interviewing mean to you? And just like explain it in plain language to a TA later, a candidate, as buzzword free as possible. We'll start with Prem.
Yeah, well, AI in and of itself is a acronym that's thrown around quite a bit, especially obviously over the last couple of years with generative AI. I've been working in AI for HR and TA for about 15 years now, and things have changed quite a bit. But when I think AI interviewing, to me, how can we use technology? How can we use AI to evaluate job candidates? In a way that's at a higher quality, in a way that's more fair. Right now, the first step is especially in high volume scenarios where we're getting lots and lots of applicant flow. We're still just using keywords via our ATS, via these scoring tools, to see how many words two pieces of paper, a resume or a profile and a job description have in common to get the list small enough to spend human time on. So that's one evaluation step. The next step where humans come in to interview, when I'm talking about AI interviewing, to me, that's more of the evaluation step where we're having a deeper evaluatory conversation, if that is a word, with job candidates, to then pass them to the humans. So the goal to me with AI interviewing is getting the right candidate to humans much faster.
Awesome. So Erica, how about you? What does AI interviewing mean to you? The pretty might not have covered.
Yeah, well, I mean, pretty much similar to Preem, I would say if I were to boil it down to two different elements, one would be leveraging an AI tool to analyze the output of a conversation that's been had by a human interviewer with a human candidate, ideally human candidate. And then the other one would be leveraging an AI-driven resource to conduct that interview. So that's the way that I look at leveraging AI in interviewing in particular.
Sure. Awesome. So staying with you, Erica, for a second. When you hear that phrase, AI interviews,
Mhm.
what's the first misconception that you think is kind of out there or that you're hearing that you want to clear up?
I think I I mean the very first thing that comes to mind, I know we're going to talk about it later, is that a concern around bias. And I would argue that actually leveraging AI in interviews, whether it's an AI interviewer or a tool to disseminate the output of an interview, actually creates the conditions for less bias to occur. And I think there's some statistics that we'll go over later to explore that. But I think that's the major misconception that comes to mind. And I could go on about this forever, but I think the reality is, um, bias can creep in regardless of what you're using from an interview perspective, whether it's in person, via video. Like there's a propensity for bias to happen no matter what. But I think that's a big misconception in my experience that there's a greater degree of bias that would happen in leveraging AI versus not.
Great. And we're definitely going to be diving into that point later in the conversation. Preem, obviously, you talk to a lot of people since you've launched this product. When you're having these conversations about AI interviewing, what are some of the things that you hear that are just, some of the most common myths or misalignments about this new kind of AI interviewing application today?
Yeah, and I like how Erica framed it in terms of kind of two facets. One is using AI to be a better interviewer on the human side. The other is taking some of the evaluation and having it done by AI. So I think the most common ones are certainly to me that I hear around candidate experience, and part of that might it includes bias, as well as taking the human out of it. And to me, in these, especially in high volume scenarios, when you're a job candidate, it's not a choice between AI and human. It's a choice between AI and being ignored or waiting on average a week to get to a human to get your questions answered. So how do we get everyone into a conversation right away? From a candidate experience standpoint, yeah, we'll talk about bias later, but in addition to candidate experience, bias is something that certainly comes up a lot. And really what we're finding on the candidate side is with these Gen AI tools to apply in at scale, it's causing an issue where we don't have the tools to engage with that demand at scale. So we are reduced to, keywords and shortcuts to make the list smaller. So, but those are things I hear generally around replacing humans, which is not the case, and as well as just candidate experience and bias.
Sure. So that I think is a natural segue into talking about efficiency and ROI. And I'll throw out my little bomb here. To me, one of the biggest misconceptions of AI interviewing is that it's an interview. In as much as I believe an interview to be between two people, I think it is a structured pre-screening conversation that is used to achieve the efficiencies to drive a short list. That said, I don't think it is at a point yet where it is an interview, unless we're passing the Turing test to the point where they can see you and hear you like a real human. So, with that said, let's talk about efficiency. And so, right now, survey that just came out said 29% of people are planning on or have implemented AI to ask real interview questions. However, 87% of people in that same survey said that they are adopting AI tools across the board. So I guess starting off, Preem, why is interviewing lagging behind other recruiting specific AI use cases? And where are you seeing the opportunity to deliver value within the interviewing process?
Yeah, no, I think in many industries and talent acquisition and recruiting is one of them. We started by using AI to be more efficient at what we're already doing. So whether that's writing job descriptions extremely fast or generating emails out to job candidates, going through large sets of data. But I think now we're moving to a phase where we can use it not just to be more efficient at what we were doing, but to do things that weren't possible before. So if we're talking about evaluation, right now, generally in each step of a human-driven interview process, there's less candidates. But if you're talking about using AI to automate that, you can theoretically have 1,000 candidates go through a full flow that has what a hiring manager might ask. So you can evaluate it in mass, versus making the list smaller because of the constraint, which is human capacity. And then, like, if I wanted to pick the best candidate out of 100 people, I probably would not talk to five and pick the best out of the 100. I'd love to talk to all 100. So I think that's one why it's taken a long time. One is that the technology hasn't been great in the past. So I think technologists like myself have to address that and acknowledge it. Like I would not put some of the tools that were out there several years back in front of job candidates. So I think it can be risky. Now that's very much changed. So I feel the technology is there, and we're also again seeing candidates use it. So that's why I think it's taken a little longer, and I'm glad it did. I'm glad people didn't jump in too early, but now is more so the time.
Great. And moving obviously along to Erica. Erica, efficiency, Preem talked about, that's always been a selling point, right? Can interview at scale, save time, save resources and money, pick up hiring velocity. There are a lot of like recruitment process outcomes that AI interviewing obviously helps. But beyond time savings, like what ROI should leaders realistically expect from implementing an AI interviewing solution?
I would say, and I have a comment about the last point that Prem was making as well.
Right.
So I would say that just more candidates are being evaluated. I mean, I think, I'll give an example. When I was at Indeed, and this is executive search, so just imagine for like a higher volume role. I remember I posted a job for like a senior VP of IT-ish. I'm kind of blending it a little bit, not to give things away. Within 24 hours, I had 600 applicants. And, between that and internal referrals and agency partnerships, there's no way that I would be able to get through applicants at the rate of 5 to 600 applicants in 24-hour increments. So I would say, aside from efficiency in that regard, I think a lot of times there are excellent candidates that are missed just because recruiters or sourcers can't get through the sheer volume. So I think that's a huge upside there. I think another thing that I would love to kind of speak to too, and this is a little controversial perhaps, but I actually think that I see more verisimilitude between AI interviewing from a pre-screening stage and some of the sourcing interviewing that happens in the Magnificent Seven. I can only speak to Meta because that's where I worked in the past, but like they are known for having an incredible recruiting machine, and part of the way they're able to get that done is their sourcing team had a script of the specific questions that they asked before the candidate even had a chance to be considered for a hiring manager interview. So I think when you're in an environment where it's very rigid, there are only specific questions that can be asked at the pre-screening stage. I think there's a lot more verisimilitude between an AI screening tool and a human than I think we give credence to. But that's my controversial opinion.
Uh,
One
um,
add, do you mind? Oh, go ahead. I was just going to add a little bit.
no, please, by all means.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is we're thinking about both time savings and quality, and we're thinking about building pipeline and talent pools. You have companies, a lot of our customers who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in recruitment marketing and on Indeed, on LinkedIn, and that's money well spent. It's working, they're getting the volume, but then they're only engaging with 5% of that
That's
volume.
it.
So if you can turn that volume and talk to everyone, you then are building, the pipeline for the next role and the next role after that. And I think the other piece of this is it's not just the companies screening the candidates, but it's the candidates screening the company.
Yes.
You can get them into a two-way conversation where they get their questions answered right away, get all those thousands of applicants into that conversation. You're going to have less drop off, less ghosting, that sort of thing.
100%. And if I can actually even like hop on onto your point there, Preem, I think one of the biggest things I think from a recruiting perspective, a recruiter's mindset is, you have, I anyone listening who's been in the recruiter seat or is in the recruiter seat, there have definitely been instances where you can have 1,500, 2,000 applicants correlated with a particular role before you kind of turn off the faucet. And so a lot of times they're incredible a lot of times there will be candidates that are like, okay, they have nothing to do with this role. But sometimes there are candidates that are just so passionate about the company, they're not right for that role, but they could be right for an adjacent role or a lower level role or a higher level role. And so I think when you leverage AI to be able to evaluate, sift through, and to be able for a recruiter to go in and it's like, hey, I'm looking for someone with ABC 1, 2, 3, those candidates are actually going to have more visibility than they may have had in the past. So again, I know I'm skewing a little bit more pro AI interviewing. The coach in me that's had so many conversations with my clients that are like depressed, disenfranchised for never hearing anything back, getting an auto response 3 months later. I think just kind of knowing where you fit in the mix helps people kind of either get excited about something, reach out to their network, or move on to the next thing. So I think this is why I'm really excited about how AI can be leveraged to drive more efficiency and more ROI, both for the employers as well as for the candidates.
And not to be the one to drop a bomb, but just according to a preprint statistic, which is going to run in the IO Psychology Journal next month, they actually found that if we're talking about driving efficiencies and winnowing that pool down, that AI interviewers let through about 54% of candidates to the next step versus traditional interviewers who only approved around 34. So
Yep.
interestingly, AI has a broader net by which to get move the candidates forward. So I think that volume is certainly interesting, but it does create amazing time efficiencies once you can get out all of the other 50% probably who don't belong.
And by the way, Matt, it's not fair that you have access to stats before they're even published. How are we supposed to?
I'm sure I could replicate that, but that was a really interesting one that was peer validated. I'm sure I could give you a vendor study that says, the exact opposite. So, with all that said, I do want to transition to something that we have been talking about, and I'm sure that this is going to be the hotbed of controversy here, which is fairness and bias in the interview process. And just a reminder to anyone who's in attendance, if you have any questions that you like to ask or any points you'd like to share with the group, please put it in the chat window, and Birch will be feeding those either as we go on or we'll have an opportunity at the end. So fairness and bias, my absolute favorite topic, and I'm sure yours too. So one would say, and Prem, I'm going to stay with you, that bias in interviews isn't new, right? Like this is something, 5 years ago we were doing unconscious bias training. Now we're looking at it more as a technological sort of thing. So I want to ask, like, how can AI reduce interviewing bias? But then I also want to flip that question and say, where is there a risk that it's actually going to make bias worse?
Mhm. Yeah. Do you want me to take that
Yeah,
or?
yes, please. Please
Yeah,
take
no, I
this.
mean, I think AI, like any technology, can when used in the right ways, make things happen more efficiently, faster, and at a higher quality. Without the right inputs, without the right people in process, it can also make things happen more efficiently, faster, and higher quality of bad. So it'll basically perpetuate what's happening. So in Erica's two use cases here, so humans being better, I've definitely become a better interviewer using AI to think, and it's sometimes things as simple as speaking over 150 words per minute in an interview disadvantages candidates where English is a second language. And you can't change what you don't measure, and everything is measurable now, and AI can help us get those insights faster. What we find, I don't consider myself a biased interviewer, but I have found that there are some areas when we did some work where we're looking at about 300,000 human to human interviews. Junior female candidates were getting 6 to 7 minutes less to speak. They were interrupted at a much higher rate. If you were an interviewer in Seattle and the candidate was also in Seattle, you'd spend or any city. I'm just in Seattle, but there's the proximity bias around. So we found about a 1.3 minutes more were spent on rapport building than if the candidate was in a different city, and this is for like a remote job. So by the time they start asking the questions, they had a higher sentiment towards the candidate. So that happens, and AI can make that worse if it's not used in the right ways. What you can control with AI done right is the structure. We're working with Microsoft's neurodiversity hiring program and using our AI interviewer for practice interviews. And one thing that was working well with that audience is structure, expectation settings, and you quickly realize that all the things you're doing to make this more accessible for a particularly disadvantaged group actually makes it better for all candidates. So I would say, yes, having consistency, structure, is important. And I can share later lots of questions I would ask vendors like us when you're going
Mm,
through the process where you can really suss out, is this actually AI done right? Is this a thin layer on top of ChatGPT? So happy to be helpful later on that. But I think there's a lot of ways we can make things more consistent and less biased.
So if I hear that right, there's both like the talent intelligence component, which is getting insights into how effective you are as an interviewer. And on the other hand, there's the benefit of being able to create objective scoring based off of standardization of the interview process as being two key bias mitigators.
Yeah,
Correct?
and even like in these AI interviews or screenings, like we can set this in our code, never talk above 150 words per minute. Do not use gender bias language. Do not use ageist language. So you can, if you have, if you're working with a vendor or have that knowledge around how you want to do the interviews, you can guarantee they will happen consistently in a way that's less biased.
I think that's awesome. So, and Erica, I want to throw it to you. This is a topic I know you feel really passionately about. So, tell me your opinion. Like, is this a net positive for bias mitigation? Is it hurting? Is it helping? Does it matter? Talk to me a little bit about, bias, fairness, and AI interviewing.
So I think, AI and interviewing is a net positive. And um, I think we're still kind of early in the game, and so I think we're going to learn things as we go along. But I think it's going to be really important, when there's the concern and fear around this. I think it's important for people to stop and reflect and ask themselves how fair and how unbiased is the existing or the legacy human to human interviewing process really. And I think if anyone's been in the seat or is in the seat, I mean, I could go on, I could spend the rest of this time giving you guys examples of where the candidate who was ultimately hired, I mean, there was like positive bias that helped them get there. So I'll give you a couple of instances. One, let's say someone is a candidate who reached out to the CEO of a company via LinkedIn, and the CEO was impressed because, oh, Jane reached out directly. We need to get her into process. So guess what? Like whether her background is above the line or below the line, so by that I mean above the bar, below the bar, she's going to get through the process further than someone who maybe had more um, relative skills. And so I think that AI can absolutely help mitigate fairness and bias in that way. The second thing is, again, like I wish I had another person that was like in the seat. I don't know, Matt, if you were in TA way back in the day, but
I've done plenty of hiring since I was officially in a TA role too. But yeah.
right. So the other thing too is I can't tell you how many times, whether it was someone reporting into me that was doing recruiting, or I was a part of a team or we're doing a team meeting, and you would hear comments where it's like, I just really like this person. I don't know, there's something about them. I think we need to put them through. And again, that's great because it's like positive regard, but is that really fair? And is that really unbiased? So I think there's a lot of heat being put on AI in terms of concerns around fairness and bias, where, I think we'd have to arguably apply that same lens to how things are actually happening in the human to human interviewing process. So
Yes.
yeah, Matt, you're right. I do feel really passionate about this. The last thing I'm going to say about this, I feel like some of the resistance is really the resistance to change. I mean, I'm old enough and like older than I care to re admit that I remember that there were concerns about making an offer to someone that someone hadn't met in person, right? So it's like unless someone had been interviewed in person, like there's no way that they would get an offer. The pandemic kind of helped change that. But I think part of the resistance is the resistance and fear of change.
I think that that's absolutely true. And without a fear of change, HR tech would probably be a little bit further along than we are at
Yep.
this particular point in time. So I guess, just kind of following up and either of you can chime in, but Erica, I'd particularly be curious to hear your take on this. We talked about, kind of positive biases.
Yep.
One could argue that the point of an interview is to create a bias both on behalf of the employer, who is trying to position themselves as the company or employer of choice. On the other hand, you have candidates who are trying to show things like culture fit. They'll get together, the soft skills stuff that we sometimes have a hard time getting along with. So in this new model, where do things like affinity, culture fit, working style, and some of those other things that can't be addressed in a structured interview, where do those fit into process?
That's a great question. So I would say, and it's a trickier one. I think, each organization, small or large, they have to ask themselves, like at some point in the interviewing process, in my opinion, I think it needs to transition from AI-driven interactions and assessments to that human to human interaction, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a human working for a human. I think, how can I put this? If there's an organization that's stable and there aren't a lot of reorgs and there's not a lot of movement within hiring, this may be less of an issue, but there's often, I forget how the adage goes, where um, people don't quit like companies, they quit managers. And so, again, from my coaching hat, I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with that they were hired for job X because they really hit it off with the hiring manager and they were excited to work with them and they really thrived underneath them. All those things were true. And that was determined in the interview. And then there was a reorg, or the manager decided to leave, or something like that. And they got shifted around. And all of a sudden, their productivity, their happiness, and so on and so forth um, took a turn for the worse. So I would say, from an employer perspective, I think that's something to consider in deciding at what point do you need to interject the human in the hiring process before a final decision is made. And then the flip side, and then I'll pass it off to you, Preem, is I I mentioned this in the chapter that I wrote for Craig Fisher's book, Paint Your Store, and it's something that I talk to my clients about all the time. The interviewing process is just as much for the candidate as it is for the employer. Doesn't really feel like that right now because there aren't lots of jobs and so on and so forth, and there's that scarcity mindset. But part of the interviewing process for the candidate is to see, like, is this a culture that works for me? Is this something that I want to be a part of? Am I getting that kind of vibe where it's like, yeah, I can interact with these people every day? And, traditionally, sourcers and recruiters are kind of the first line of being culture champions for the company. So I think when you've got a sourcer or a recruiter or a sourcing team and recruiting team that are excellent champions for the company, then they get it right. But if you have a couple bad eggs in there, and you do see that, especially in high volume recruiting and larger organizations, you can have a couple of bad apples that you miss out on great candidates that may not happen if AI were at the front end of the screening process. So I think it's a mixed bag. And it's something to absolutely pay attention to.
Awesome. Prim, do you have anything to add?
I'll be brief, but so yeah, I think as you alluded to, Matt, there's kind of two types of bias. There is bias where we're choosing and maybe more subconscious accidental bias. So I think we should eliminate, and AI can help with that, the stuff we're not trying to do. But I think it's absolutely fair if you are hiring a product manager to bias towards, with your hiring philosophy, to bias towards product managers with technical backgrounds versus ones that are not. But that is still a bias, and I think
Yep.
bias is used as a shortcut to pattern match. I talked to a hiring team that I won't name them, but they'd leave university recruiting events and have a stack of resumes and just throw out anything that didn't say Stanford on it. And it's a
Mm.
tool is a shortcut to kind of get us similar patterns that we've seen lead to success in the past. But if we had tooling that would allow us to talk and get to know everyone at the top, like earlier in the funnel, then we wouldn't need to do that. And I think as we talk about AI interviewing and going to your definition, Matt, you're right. It isn't replacing the human meeting with the set of 5 to 6 people, but it's not adding unnecessary bias before you even meet the people to choose who those 5 folks are by getting to know everyone.
Right. And I'd also like to throw out there that if your process will favor or the results of a AI interview and disqualify people who haven't met that threshold by trusting that, you're committing algorithmic bias in the first place. So I think it's one of those things you can't really avoid, but certainly it seems like something that's going to level the playing field to a
Yeah, and
certain.
and last thing I'll say on this, like even the resume itself is a shortcut by which to pick
Absolutely.
who you talk to, and we are certainly choosing because it's the best thing we can do right now, but choosing to bias towards resumes that are better written, designed better,
Yep.
those sort of things, even if it might not be directly correlated to that person's ability to do the job.
Awesome.
And Matt,
Awesome.
we have a few like questions and comments that have been coming in that I want to read off quickly.
Great.
Um,
Awesome. Can I actually really respond to this real quickly
oh
before
yeah,
you read
yeah.
it off?
Go
So,
ahead.
Prem, one thing you made me think about too that I think would be important to consider both for AI and interviewing in general is like where's the place for the wild card candidates,
Mhm.
right? So it's like, when you have lit organization where it's like, did they go to Stanford? Yes, no. Like that's super binary. Stanford, yes, you move on. Stanford, no, you're gone. And so I think that's another way that could help mitigate the perceived or actual bias, both from AI interviewing and then just standard human to human interviewing, is to create as a part of the process a bucket for wild card candidates where it's like, hey, they don't meet 80% of the criteria, but they have these two things that are really important to the hiring manager in this role. So we're going to go ahead and move them forward as a wild card candidate.
Mhm.
And so those would be people who meet like preferred qualifications if we looked at it from a job description perspective.
Yeah, or kind of like aren't quite at the bar. I mean, some of the greatest hires I've watched be made are people that almost didn't make it or have been said no to three
Yeah.
or four times. And so I just think it's something that we need to consider when it comes to fairness and bias. And really, the goal is ultimately hiring the best person for the role. Where is that space for someone who doesn't meet all the preferred qualifications, but there are one or two critical elements that they have where it's like, hey, you know what? This is so rare. This combination is so rare. Let's go ahead and move them through.
Yeah, and I even say like we might also even be missing out on the people that actually do meet the criteria but
That's
don't
it.
have the right keywords in their resume. So like our people ops person at Humanly, Sarah, had wedding planning experience in her background. Many tools might match. Okay, wedding planners. Then we're going to send her wedding planning jobs, which is why we all get spammed in SMS and whatnot. But tools that are looking at beyond that would extrapolate wedding planning equals good organization skills,
Yeah.
punctuality, which Matt
Sure.
does this job. Yeah.
So that makes an argument, obviously, to the AI object language clustering NLP sort of thing, right? To be able to detect different ontologies, which I know is something that you guys and a lot of different vendors are working on. So I think that's a valid point. And the other thing I just want to throw out there, I have not actually been hired since 2008 into a job that exists. So to Erica's point, I have always thought that in sourcing or recruiting, there is a definite role for people out there to do what we call informational interviews,
Yes.
which is not role specific.
Yep.
Yep.
It can't be structured around any existing questions or criteria because it's essentially to get to know a little bit more about that person, not even for necessarily for a job that exists now, but maybe in the future, or somebody who is on the market who there's enough organizational need to create a role for, which is something, I found that has happened to me quite a lot. So, before we turn over to Birch's question, the last thing I'll say is I would say if we are driving these time savings, and we want to increase, and we'll talk about this in a second, kind of the ability to personalize on the people who meet these sort of things, I would encourage people to use those time savings to continue to have those informational interviews.
That's it. It's a great call out.
That's a good
Uh,
point.
so, yeah, questions though.
Yes, so there's a number of questions. I'll just kind of read through them, and you can respond to the most recent ones. So some of my job postings have attracted over 3,000 applicants. For those who are not selected for an interview, I'm torn between sending out 2,950 rejection emails to applicants, thereby delivering en masse disappointing news, or not sending the rejections. Obviously, folks were not selected if they didn't receive an invite. Thoughts? And then Matt commented, are companies using or wanting to use AI interviewers to completely replace human interviews? So never sending to a human. Nancy is asking, uh, any data or experience with an interviewing agent when we consider a workforce that is human plus AI agent employees? And then Mario is asking, during an interview, candidates often provide extra information that talks to their character, personality. How do you gather this information to assess things like culture fit and ability to do the role? So a lot there. And I'll let
Yeah, that was pretty broad.
you.
Um, let's start off on answering the question about kind of moving through the process and not having any sort of human interjection from an interviewing perspective. I know that a few companies, particularly not only high volume, but high turnover type of jobs. UPS famously did this, Amazon, FedEx as well. The kind of entirely automated process. Good idea or bad idea, Bream?
It really does depend. And another element of this is the quality of the interviewer. So are these three or four folks equipped to assess that this person is going to work well from a culture ad standpoint? But yeah, I mean, I would say generally, unless we're talking those high volume job that I have seen a couple examples like you're saying, Matt, and I think it can work. But yeah, no, I certainly think things like culture ad are important for humans to evaluate. If it's a job where you're working amongst other people and that this is an important aspect, I think to touch on the agents in the workforce, the other piece there too. Yeah, I think when you're looking at an AI tool, you should also ask yourself, is this a culture ad or is it not? But from a human standpoint, yeah, it's I'm seeing people do it. I'm hearing leaders say, hey, we want to get to like 95% automated. But it's I would leave it up to you all. So to identify what are those elements that you feel are very important for humans to evaluate. Maybe it's culture ad, maybe it's something else. And once you know what that is, then you can identify what process would get you folks that meet all the other criteria to then spend human time on those aspects.
Yeah, great. And just for what it's worth, I know this is kind of around it, but it is interesting because we talk about the rise of agentic versus human. And just HBR published a study I thought was interesting that said that, only 2.2% of all interviews that they did in their survey talked about AI skills at all as part of that. So it's interesting we're using these tools and adopting them in the workplace, but only 2% of us are asking anything in the interview process about AI itself. So that's just an interesting statistical call out. Erika, given your background, I wanted you to take the question, if you don't mind, on good idea or bad idea to send out 3,999 mass rejections or not.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you gave me this question. Yeah, so I think she said, like, say 3,000 applicants, 2,950 mass rejections. My answer is hands down yes. Like, yes, you're going to be disappointing people, and that's a lot of disappointment. But the reality is, it's worse for candidates not to know where they stand. Like, if you know that you have been dispositioned for a role, then you know it is what it is. You can follow up with somebody in your network if you choose to, or you can move on. but not responding, that is the number one from a candidate experience perspective. And as a coach, it's the number one thing that I hear in terms of I've applied to like 111 jobs in this week and I haven't heard back from a single person. That's gut wrenching. So yes, send out all 2,950 rejection emails. It's disappointment, but at least people know and they can move on.
Yeah. And just I guess to back that up, I absolutely agree. I think you don't want to be in the place where you're pulling in a resume, parsing it, and 4 seconds later sending them a rejection email,
Yeah.
right? And I certainly think that those emails become more important down the line, right? So people who make it past an initial screen to, let's say, an AI interview, probably, this are going to be a little bit different, both timing and response. I would say the one thing that AI interviews do allow us to do that we haven't really talked about is provide automated feedback to the candidate in terms of why or why they were not passed along in the process. And that's something that we are not able to do at scale today. So I do think that is a huge area of opportunity, is some element of coaching at scale.
Yep.
So
I also want to make one quick point about the previous question about like hiring process with no humans at all. I think just something to consider is like with the rise of fake candidates and fake profiles, like it's not new to the industry, but it's certainly like there's a huge uptick in that. I think organizations need to really, whether it's a warehouse worker or something else, volume driven, like ask yourself, are you willing to take that risk of not having a human verify that they're absolutely a real person that will show up to the job? So it's not for me to answer, but I think it's something companies need to think about.
And I love that conversation point about fake jobs because I would also encourage employers to think, excuse me, fake candidates. I would also encourage employers to think about fake jobs, and
Yeah.
maybe that will help also take care of this fake candidate problem as well if you're able to actually align positions with need as opposed to putting up a job slot and seeing what you get. So, Bert, should we cover all the questions that have come in?
I think so. The last one from Mario, during an interview, candidates often provide extra information that talks to their character, personality. I think we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Already,
so.
but yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and just the one thing that I know we're going to talk about candidate experience, but we talked a little bit about just people's attitudes and job seeker attitudes towards this AI, and so only 7% of candidates who were surveyed. This was an MIT Sloan poll actually from 2024, so maybe this has gone up a little bit, but only 7% of candidates said that they feel comfortable with AI being deployed to make a hiring decision or have any sort of play in a final hiring decision. And around 70% say they're not comfortable even with AI screening their resumes for which they apply. So I think that there does seem to be a disconnect between what candidates and employers want. So, which I think brings us to a nice segue to candidate experience. Okay, so obviously we only have about 10 minutes. So I want to start with Premier. We've been talking a lot about the importance of personalization in the interviewing process as a profession. That's kind of, you want to personalize the experience, you want to get to know the candidates, all this. Um, how do you suggest improving candidate experience given that you're not essentially personalizing this step of the process? What impacts do you see candidates having on the interviews? Do they love it? Do they hate it? What do you
Yeah,
suggest?
yeah, and I'd even argue it can be even more personalized than what's happening now. But so couple of things. So we do measure it. So candidates we have a little survey at the end, and they'll rate it about a 4.8 out of 5, and it's very similar kind of journey as when we first launched our chatbot. There was a lot of kind of fear. What we find what candidates want is they want to move they want, as Erica said, they want to know where they stand. They want to move on faster. They don't want to wait. They don't want to wait and not hear back. I also agree with sending these rejection emails, but I also think the rejection emails are the one of the most underutilized pieces of real estate in recruitment marketing. Like it has a very high open rate, a marketer's dream, but there's nothing in there. So, but can you use these two-way conversations to not to create an outcome for every candidate? And the outcome might be, hey, you're not a great fit. Here's some other information you can look at, or we'd love to be in touch as you have this other requirement. Come back to us when this happens. So I kind of feel with everything we've talked about, it's kind of coming to the point where with thousands of candidates, if we can have a two-way conversation with every single one, we're going to match better. And we're also going to let them tell their story, let them talk about their when we talk about the question around personality and culture, if you're not even talking to thousands of these candidates, you wouldn't even know that in the first place. So, like, are we able to scale the ability to have a conversation with every single person that applies? To me, that will help with candidate experience. And then the other is, yeah, just speed and follow up, knowing what next steps are. But you can kind of in this AI world, you can go through a application, phone screen, and then a video interview in a couple hours. So the speed I think is an important thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly, Erica, question for you.
Mhm.
Same sort of candidate experience pool. So, um, people really put a lot of stock in interviewing. In fact, there's around a 73% greater chance that a candidate who has a great interviewing experience is going to accept an offer, and about a
Yep.
50% greater chance that they'll be there for 3 years just with a great first interview experience, right?
Hmm.
So my question is, just in terms of looking at the fact that interviews are so crucial to not only providing a great candidate experience, but getting an offer accepted and getting a hire done. What do you think organizations need to do in order to balance that great experience with the optimizations and time savings on the process side? So
I'd
how?
say simply put, setting expectations up front.
Okay.
You know, somebody applies to a job, set the expectations, help them know what the process is gonna look like, what part is going to be, an AI interaction, and what part's going to be, at what point will it become a human interaction? And I think if you set the expectations up front, um, I think you can help someone have a better candidate experience. One last adjacent point on this point, more and more people are using Gen AI to interact on a variety of different things, whether it's help me with this recipe, life advice, these kinds of things. So I think that we should take this into consideration that with that uptick in interaction with AI in day-to-day life, I could see there being less resistance shortly to AI at the front end of the funnel.
Sure. And trend data would suggest you're correct, although incrementally so. So again, we have 5 minutes, and I know that Bert, you have some closing thoughts, remarks. So just very high level takeaway question. And we'll start with you, Prem. What is the one question every recruiting leader should be asking about AI interviewing right now? Just in terms of either evaluating the tool or evaluating the vendor.
Other than asking vendors to provide third-party audits as it relates to bias and things like that. Yeah, no, I think one question specifically to ask, not so much do we want to replace our humans doing these, but more so how are we in what is the experience we want to create for the 2,000 people that applied?
Great. Erica?
I'd say security questions, I mean, just making sure that it's compliant in all the ways that it needs to be compliant from an IT perspective.
Great. And I think that is obviously a huge area that we weren't able to address, but I'm sure we'll be following up with some collateral on that shortly. And I'm going to say the one question that every recruiting recruiter should be asking about AI interviewing right now is this something that will improve outcomes, or is this a process issue that can be fixed without the implementation of additional technology? So in other words, is my acceptance rate of submissions to interviews to hiring manager final interviews. Like, is this really going to impact it, or are we just shortlisting a shortlist? Right. And I think that there's a big difference between those use cases. So with that, and I know we're coming to an end, I'm going to turn it back over to Birch to take us home. Thank you so much to everyone who took the time to listen to us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was an awesome conversation. So thank all three of you. I did want to forward this offer. Preem has very kindly volunteered his time to like answer any questions. So Preem, I'll let you like kind of kind of share more about what this
Oh,
opportunity.
oh yeah, no, I often do this. If anyone wants to get my thoughts on the tool landscape, not going to be specific to Humanly, but I'm happy to talk about that too. But I also we share a lot of information around how to evaluate vendors, what questions to ask. So more than happy to have that conversation if folks would like to schedule time with me. I think we'll send. We have my scheduling link there. Okay, cool.
Great.
Sweet. And yeah, we'll go ahead and send that out to everyone after the webinar. But uh yeah, I think that wraps us up.
Yep. And again, we'll be doing these hopefully on a monthly basis. So everyone who is here, thank you for joining us on our pilot. And I'd really like to thank both Preem and then our special guest, Erika Oliver, for their great, input, feedback, and expertise. I learned a lot, and that's something I don't get to say frequently. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having me.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.